Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Hi, I'm Laurel. Welcome to episode 45 of Oxford from the Inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth. Today we're joined by Lucinda and Maya. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Maya. I was an English student at Mansfield College. I've just graduated, so I'm out in the real world now. But I was at Mansfield with the lovely Lucinda.
Which is me. I'm Lucinda, obviously. I'm the senior tutor at Mansfield, and I also teach English. So I interview for English at Mansfield.
Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. We're going to be talking about the infamous ELAT, the English admissions test, how to prep for it, which skills you should be trying to demonstrate, and how ultimately the best course of action is to try and have fun with it. I think it's kind of the main message that usually comes across when we talk about the ELAT. So the first kind of question we're going to kick it off with is, could you first both tell us what your favourite book is right now?
You go, Maya. Go.
Okay, so right now, not my all-time favourite book, but a favourite recent book is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, which is a great book title. It really sells itself. But it's a sort of sci-fi speculative fiction novel about these giant robot art sculptures arriving on Earth and infecting everyone's dreams, and then all of humanity is having this shared dream every night, and there are all these puzzles in it to solve. And when I finished uni, I was just like, I want a book with a very exciting plot, and it kind of fills that hole, but also has a lot of interesting stuff to say about sort of internet fame, which is really well handled, I think, and which is something that is often not so well handled. So yeah, that's a favourite recent book. It's very enjoyable.
That was a hard sell. I'm like, you can hear me tapping on Amazon, like, trying to get this book now. And Lucinda, what's your current favourite?
So my favourite all time is Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons, and because it's a really funny book, and I think it's really difficult to write funny, and my own sort of area of knowledge in English is medieval, and it couldn't be further from medieval. It's a lovely story about a kind of a young woman who kind of goes to a house in the country, a sort of farm in the country, and sort of sorts out everybody's lives. It's a very tidy book. And yeah, just very, very funny. And it also sort of takes the rise out of D.H. Lawrence a lot, which I think anybody who does that is a good thing for me. Generally speaking, I read a big variety. So I like detective fiction. I like science fiction. I like vampire romances. You know, I have a really wide range of, a big long book is what I like, really.
It's not just all the classics, not the kind of what you would think of as soon as you think of Oxford.
No.
Yeah. Lovely. So if we start with Maya, could you kind of outline what the admissions test kind of, like, what skills you found kind of key to starting it? So obviously you've got 90 minutes, you're presented with these texts. When you sit down, what should you kind of be doing? If that makes sense.
Yeah, don't panic. I think it can be a little bit overwhelming when you're like, oh my god, I need to read 6 extracts or whatever it is and really understand them, and you're not going to do that. So I think kind of being selective is a big thing for the ELAT, and I think is something that I struggled with at that time. Throughout my degree really, but especially when I was doing A-levels, was trying to cram too much in. And so I think kind of just trying to streamline your ideas. So don't, get really deep into all the passages, have a quick read through them, and then kind of work out which ones you're most drawn to. You mostly understand what's going on. I think there can be a kind of tendency to go, I'm going to pick the ones that sound the most impressive. If you can't say anything interesting about them because you don't get them, or they're just not interesting to you, then that's not the best strategy. So I think just being kind of realistic with yourself about what you can do is very important. And then obviously it's a sort of test of your close reading skills essentially. So I did a little bit of brushing up on sort of literary terms before I did my ELAT, which was helpful, but I don't think you need to spend like loads of time drilling yourself on that. It's more about, what was more helpful was just like reading little poems or little extracts and then just trying to think, well, what would I say about this, and what is the most interesting little phrase here, and why is that, and then trying to work out how that might connect to other things. I think that's kind of how I approached it. Yeah, and my theme was storms, which it was quite difficult to like come up with an argument about, I found. But yeah, I think let your interest guide you. And that helps. Yeah.
We had food in my year, lots of passages about lobsters, which was quite interesting. I think I went for the less like kind of obviously food centered pieces of text because it wasn't particularly grabbing my attention. But
I think I was involved in setting that one, and the thing that was slightly funny when people answered that was that loads of people got very upset about animal welfare in writing their pieces. So lots of people wrote about it's really cruel to the lobster, which sort of wasn't the point. But we so there was some interesting answers came from that one. But
how would you suggest preparing for the ELAT, Lucinda? As someone
well, I think so I think the things Maya said, but I suppose like she said about narrowing it down, I think that anybody reading anything that's kind of new and different, when you're used to when people are doing A-level and their kind of current qualifications, they might be used to reading something loads and loads of times and knowing it really, really well. And what we're trying to do, obviously, when people submit their written work for English applications, and when we talk to them about the work they're doing in school and college, then we ask them questions about that. And this is sort of trying to test something different, which is kind of a sort of slightly first impressions. But there are ways in which you can narrow down how much of a kind of surprise that is by, well, as Maya says, thinking, can I write better about poetry or prose? Can I write about something older or newer? And sort of in a way looking through and thinking these are the ones that are likely to suit me. And it is the case that every single one of them can be compared with another. So, we look at them when I was involved in setting it, you look carefully at the passages and think about interesting ways that any of them might be combined with any of the others. So there are essentially 6 passages on a common theme. And the task is not to be referring to other texts outside of those 2 texts, but to be focusing on interesting ways in which that theme is dealt with in the 2. And so the advice I always give students for kind of starting it is read it through very carefully and work out what the plot is. I mean, I say this a lot to my own students in class as well. So work out what the kind of narrative of the passage is and think about how that makes some kind of progress. And then think about using that as a sort of a hook onto which to hang things you might say about the tone, about the use of language, about the use of sound, and always be thinking, and how does this one do it differently? So almost having like a little voice, even write it down on the paper, kind of like, so how does this do it differently to the other one? And remind yourself to say that. And when I've looked at them, so the tutors don't mark the ELAT, they're marked by a group of graduates and examiners, and very carefully double marked, sometimes triple, sometimes quadruply marked. But I look at them at the end of the process when we've pretty much chosen, the top 15 of the candidates, and we have a look to see whether there's people who we think there's, particular talent in the ELAT alongside everything else. And I'm always surprised, they're actually quite short. You can't write much. You're supposed to read for half an hour and write for an hour. And so students should try to kind of make a point and move on to another point, say as many things as they can rather than get obsessed about just making one point over and over again. Because I think that's also really difficult when you're looking at a new text, not to get caught on saying one thing. So think about the plot, and hang on the plot, some literary device things, and think about comparison, and don't worry about it being short, because it is short.
Yeah. In terms of structuring, like both of you feel free to jump in on this one. I think I was very concerned about having to have like an introduction and then trying to make the separate paragraphs with separate points, but what would you kind of suggest for how to structure an actual answer?
I mean, well, what do you think? What do you think, Mo?
Well,
Okay.
I think that I know you're not very big on introductions anyway,
No.
but I think in an ELAT they are a bit kind of, you can't really say anything particularly meaty in an introduction for a short essay.
Yep.
So, you know, set yourself up with a little intro if you need to, but really you want to get deep into the texts, and so that should be kind of taking up your time. I think structuring it is kind of a case of working out, for me it was a case of really working out what my points were going to be, and not just being very vaguely, oh, I'm going to talk about like this line and this line and this line in this paragraph. I needed to kind of group it together, because otherwise I would kind of do what Lucinda was saying and get hung up on something, and then it would take up the whole answer. So kind of being quite rigid with yourself about what you're going to talk about in each chunk, I think, is helpful.
And I think, I mean, to some extent, the narrative of the passages leads you to do that. So if you're thinking about how the passages are structured, then you could structure your argument on the ELAT about, for instance, I don't know, if when you're comparing two passages and they've got particularly rich imagery, but it's not a very narrative piece, then you should, then make that lead what you write. But if it's a bit, so I remember one that was set a few years ago was a bit of Conrad's
Art of Darkness?
No, it wasn't Art of Darkness. It was the one where the lad gets blown up by a bomb. Here we are, three English students who can't remember that. So it was Not All Quiet on the Western Front. Can't remember what it's called. Anyway, The Secret Agent. That's it. And it was the point at which the mother in The Secret Agent finds out that her husband has caused their son or her son to be blown up in a bomb, and she stabs him. And it was an incredibly dramatic scene. You couldn't write about that and just saying the imagery of the blood flowing is very interesting. You'd have to say something about the fact that it was a scene in which there was a build-up of tension and shock. So I think the idea with the ELAT is your readers, and you have to think of yourself as a reader and respond to it as a reader, and follow what you follow as a reader. So follow the logic of yourself as a reader. I suppose what I would say is follow that logic and then think, okay, if I want to say the same thing again, I have to find a different way of saying it. I have to find something in the rhyme, or I have to find something in the length of sentences or something. So try to get a little bit of variety, as you do in your conversation with people, the variety of speed and density.
Yeah, I guess that's the other thing where planning can help you, as someone who was, once again, an under planner. I think do that, because it will help you remember to make the comparisons. And I think if you kind of don't give yourself a plan, if you favor one text, you're just going to end up writing about that, and you need to like get those comparisons into your kind of structure.
In terms of like the closer reading element, how did you practice before yours? Also, like, how do you improve those skills generally? Because I know if you're doing an English literature A level, or even an English language one, I didn't personally do that, but I'm pretty sure they do the same. You do need to develop those skills anyway. So even without doing the admissions test, it's useful to develop them. But how's best to kind of tackle that?
I did a lot of like 5-10 minute bursts looking at normally poems. You could do it with other bits of text, but I think kind of asking those very kind of straightforward questions that sort of Lucinda was referencing, what actually happens in this, and then also a question that they quite often ask you in interviews, which is, what did you think of this, which can weirdly take you by surprise sometimes, I think. And kind of going, okay, what happens in this, what do I think of this, what's most interesting, or where is the language doing something interesting? And also something that I picked up at A level was paying attention to things that you didn't understand. You know, if it's a really tricky passage and you're not understanding anything, then it's kind of a different matter. But if there's a bit where you're like, I'm not quite sure if they mean this or this, that can actually be something really interesting to explore, and not be kind of freaked out by. So I think that was how I tried to develop my close reading. Just those, and I think if you're just like giving yourself really short little practices, that can kind of be an easier way to do it and to fit it around all the other A levels work that you need to be doing, rather than trying to sit down and like ram through practice paper after practice paper, which you don't really need to do.
We were recommended like 2 to 3 maximum like full papers to do before. I think I did one full one before, and then did the kind of annotating with all your little highlighters and pulling all the different bits out of the text. But
yeah, I'd recommend doing 1 or 2, but not getting too worried. I mean, like I said earlier, actually, just trying to find yourself a couple of pieces of writing on a theme, or be quite readerly when you're reading something, and do a little bit of analysis. Sometimes doing analysis on something you're familiar with can help you practice. I think doing a kind of like a little oral one with a friend. You know, if you've got somebody else who likes English, sit down and say, do a speedy thing, like what's 10 minutes of things I could get out of this. Something that people say a lot with tests, and I mean, I'm a tutor of admissions, so I talk to students about tests in general quite a bit. And one of the things I think is you can practice something and do it really well and really thoroughly when you do it very slowly. But when it gets difficult is when you're under a bit of time pressure and you're a bit nervous. So it's a really good idea to practice a shorter version, because you know you will lose time through the bit of stress and the fact that it's unfamiliar. So I think practicing a couple, it is difficult. If you go on the ELAT site, which is very good and has got lots of really helpful information, anything which is modern and in copyright isn't there. They will just give you what the poem is and you have to look it up yourself. So making yourself a paper is almost as easy as going and trying to find those line references. Also, your teachers should help you do that. I was talking to a teacher the other day who said she'd gone online and found the poems and stuff. And you can do that, but it takes a little bit of extra work.
It's about the kind of practicing that oral, kind of talking about the poetry as well. It's so useful for the interview process, because then you have that interview. I don't know if it's the same at every college. At Jesus you have the like unseen poem. And they're talking through it for half an hour, so kind of developing those skills as well is definitely on top of that. It's just excellent.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be with someone who knows what you're on about. I did some of that with my parents. If you just need someone willing, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I say a lot. I think you should practice interviews like with your gran or something who, loves you, and so doesn't, kind of thinks you're doing really well, whatever you're saying, and gives you a little bit of positive reinforcement. And just practicing talking. I mean, another thing that you can do, I think, is students can do is read a poem and then just write themselves a little, kind of why I like this, or why it's funny, or, just write themselves almost like a little stream of consciousness on it. And anything that practices in that way is really helpful as well, just for getting your sort of reading bravery going a bit.
Thank you. It's kind of a slight divergence from the topic, but I just was thinking, both of you have been quite heavily involved in widening participation and access and outreach. I've worked with both of you on various kind of different outreach things.
Thank you.
Are there any schemes and kind of organisations or resources that you'd like to signpost for people at all?
I'd say don't ever pay for anything, because if you do, they're usually dodgy. So I could give you a list of things not to go to. But I mean, Unique is great. I think Unique is good for because you get to meet loads of, and sadly not this year because they were all online, but you get to meet loads of other students, and you realise that there's just lots of other normal people who are applying for Oxford, and that sort of, even just doing that demystifies. But every college, we have, so Mansfield, we have Sarah, who's just brilliant access officer, and every college has really good access officers, mostly who've been really quite recent students, so do understand what it's like. I think ACS for students is really, really good at kind of like doing some work for encouraging students to apply. First gen, getting first generation students to apply. So any of the kind of schemes, the schemes which are student-led, target schools, lots of those kind of things, which are really, really good. But basically just getting in touch with or getting your school to get in touch with, or college to get in touch with a college and saying, I'd like, can you do something for us? So lots of the things we're doing at the moment is helping people with interview practice a bit, with, just getting them braver for the process, anything that you don't have to pay for, and things that you do yourself. So I think you should keep a little book of, things you've read, questions you've had about things you've read, lectures you've listened to, podcasts you listened to, and just keep a little sort of diary of what you learn. And then there's a lot of things you can do by yourself, and particularly as we are at the moment, so students at the moment are having particular difficulties because they've been out of education for quite a long while, lots of them. And so we're kind of really pushed back on our own resources. So I think trying to kind of remember to sort of trust your own resources a bit as well, to kind of look up things and read more.
Yeah, very good. I agree. But just other ones to add.
Maya and Ira's one on these things.
Yeah, we're a united
the dream team.
Yeah. But just things that kind of I came across. If you're looking beyond Oxford, there's the Sutton Trust summer schools, which kind really of are similar for students from state schools. There's Oxford Pathways, which is kind of like one-day taster things, which are really good. And then if you're just like trying to find Englishy stuff, Great Writers Inspire is an Oxford website that has loads of lectures recorded as podcasts. There's some really good ones on Shakespeare by Emma Smith that are very like accessible but also interesting. So that's something I'd recommend. And there was something else as well. Oh, and then there's Oxvlog, which is like a YouTube channel with lots of students talking about their experiences at Oxford. So if you're looking for that kind of thing, that's good. But there's so many, I'm a big fan of podcasts. There's so many like literary podcasts out there. There's like The New Yorker has one, Guardian books. There's so many. So you can kind of go down rabbit holes a bit, and just like listening to something a bit different can be quite interesting. And depends if you're going into college at the moment, but I always used to like listen to them on my commute to college. So it's you kind of feel like you're not having to spend time on it as well, which is handy.
And finally, what's your best piece of advice for anybody making an application to Oxford?
The ultimate question.
Oh, is Lucinda still here?
So I have this thing about, I don't like the word confidence, because I think confidence is a lot about surface. But I think being brave is kind of just thinking, I'm not going to be eaten by a lion or, attacked by a bear. They're just kind of, they're just tutors who are geeky about English. They're the least aggressive people in the world. So just be brave about that, and talk to friends about what you like about literature, I think, because then that makes you feel happy about talking about that yourself. So my college is 96% state sector, kind of, that's like the world. So, or like the UK, I should say. That's, so that's really just a normal environment. So just, and also I think the other thing, this is always my piece of advice, I think, is that when people apply to a college, they don't have to think about whether they fit into the college. A college changes by a third every time a new year of students comes along. So by going to a college, you change it. So don't think, Oxford is this kind of like steel wall, which I have to find this little tiny door in. That's not the case. Oxford is a dynamic and changing place, which has people like Laurel, has people like Maya in it. And so don't fret about that. It's fine.
I mean, that's pretty hard to follow. But just, I think, be nice to yourself and be realistic with yourself about like what you can do. Like, applying to Oxford shouldn't be a full-time job. Like, it's a thing that you're doing alongside your academic work and also having a life, which is really important, and you're allowed to have that. So don't forget that whilst you're applying. You know, Oxford is great. I loved being there, but there are lots of other really great universities and great non-university things to do. Like, it's 3 years of your life, which is big because it's 3 years of your life, but it's also only 3 years of your life. I think it could be easy to forget that sometimes.
Lovely. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And also thank you to everybody tuning in. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Oxford from the Inside, and check out the YouTube channel as well. Everybody stay safe, look after yourselves, and until next time, thank you very much. Right.
Thank you. Take care, good luck, be brave.